Hello and welcome to another movie review, of course, here on HSG, and when I come across a movie such as this one, The Fury of a Patient Man, it's very difficult for me to not overhype it, because for those of you who haven't seen it, who of course should stick to the non-spoiler part of this, and I really would recommend that, don't watch the spoiler part even until you've checked out the flick first, but I don't want to hype this movie up too much. But I will say, it has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a reason for that. I love this movie. In fact, this might be the best new movie I've seen in about 4 or 5 months, easily. And I thoroughly enjoyed all of it. The start, the middle, the end, the characters, the cinematography, the action, the violence, the tone, the pacing. I loved it across the board. There's hardly any music in the flick, which is very appropriate. The primary actor, the primary character of this patient man, a guy who's not big, he's not buff, he's not ex-military, he's not even tall. They make a point of saying just the opposite in the film, played by an actor named Antonio de la Torre, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing his name, so apologies for that. But it's a Spanish flick from 2016, and everything about it just reeks of realism. It's gritty, it's grimy, it's almost nasty. It's the kind of movie which could borderline be disturbing for somebody who's not used to this kind of film, but for those of us who enjoy movies such as Good Time with Robert Pattinson, The Rover, which for me I enjoy even more so with Pattinson in it, something like 7 Days of Retaliation, a French movie which I adore. I think it's a fantastic revenge flick, and even something which is maybe better known like I Spit on Your Grave, or more recently Revenge perhaps. I wouldn't say that they are anywhere near as good as this, but that's the kind of vibe that you can expect. Slower pacing, more of a build-up with small explosions of violence rather than a non-stop John Wick style thing. And there's nothing wrong with John Wick. I adore those films as well, but this is not that kind of experience. This is much more introspective, slower. I would not say it's a slow film. It's very deliberately paced, and it's actually not that long either. It's about an hour and a half, and yet it feels like more than enough. The movie does not overstay its welcome. The pacing, as I said, is fantastic, and when the violence does happen, it feels like it has this weight to it. It makes it feel more realistic, and the vibe also strongly reminds me of a type of movie which my dad used to love, which is those kind of British Borstal kind of movies like Scum and ones like that, where the violence is very understated, but also very nasty, very mean-spirited, almost, and this reminds me of that kind of vibe very much. I loved it for it. I absolutely adored this film. Now, if you're not familiar with the plot, as you can kind of tell, it is a revenge flick. And put simply, it's about this patient man, a relatively quiet man, whose family was affected by a robbery. Very drastically affected. And he wants revenge on the people involved in the robbery. It's as simple as that. But in order to get to those people, he needs to find those who are related to them, who know where they are perhaps, and try and not necessarily threaten those people into telling him, because, as I said, he's not some spec ops guy, he's just an average Joe. But he's smart, and he's connected enough and has enough people skills to, instead of threatening someone into giving him information, almost make them like him enough to give him information. I like that. That's also not something which you typically see in a revenge flick. Usually it's this non-stop kill everyone in your way kind of thing. In this movie, it is not like that. And in that way, it also shares a lot in common with 7 Days of Retaliation. Now, if it wasn't already apparent, to sum up my non-spoiler thoughts, definitely watch this movie. Now, some people I could see maybe not liking the ending. For me, I wasn't fully decided on the ending until the screen goes black. And then I thought, okay, that's the ending. I like it. And to me, this is the first time in a long time when I've come across an ending that I was right on the fence with. Because it's not the kind of movie where the ending's going to undo everything like it was all a dream or something like that. It's not that kind of ending. But you'll see what I mean when you see it. And in that regard, I find it very similar, once again, to 7 Days of Retaliation. Very similar. And if you enjoyed that movie, I think chances are you'll probably like this one. Because even though they're different, they almost feel similar. In fact, I would describe this movie in the most succinct way possible as being a combination of The Rover and 7 Days of Retaliation. Those two put together. If that sounds like your kind of movie, definitely check it out. If it's not your kind of movie, watch it anyway, because it's really good. Now, as far as spoiler talk, I'm going to assume that you've seen the movie at this point, so if you haven't, please don't watch this part of the video. Please don't spoil it for yourself. Experience this movie, appreciate everything great about it, and then come back if you have to. My adoration for this movie is just on every level. I love the fact that there's hardly any music. Even that ending, as I just alluded to, when he doesn't kill the driver, the getaway driver from the start, I initially didn't like that. I had a twinge that I wanted him to kill him too. But I almost feel like that guy had been punished enough on a personal level by seeing all of his friends be killed. At the same time, though, I thought it was an interesting ending because it's not necessarily a happy one. And I think that was probably the point. Because if you think about how the movie ends, she doesn't want to be with that guy. She wants to be with the protagonist. She already made that clear. Now, she became scared of him at the end, obviously, because of going to kill her brother, which was a great little twist. But even so, you can see at the end she's not happy, even when the guy comes back. She's almost relieved out of duty, it seems, out of, like, responsibility, almost feeling that she's guilty somehow, when she's not, of course. But I initially wanted him to kill him as well. And I wondered if the film might go really dark and have him drop off the guy at the end and find that he'd already killed the woman and the kid. And, of course, that wouldn't have really made much sense, because that's not the kind of guy he was. But that's why I was kind of concerned that that might be the ending, because that would have undermined the rest of the film, so I'm glad they didn't do that. But as far as spoilers, I guess there's not a huge amount of specific moments to get into, but if you've seen the movie, I think you know why I like it so much. I don't see many people watching this flick and thinking, oh, I hated that, or that was trash, I really didn't enjoy that. I think people will either say, I absolutely loved it, or, yeah, I get it. You know, some things you can understand why people like them, even if you don't necessarily love them all that much. For me, for instance, I'd put something like The Godfather into that category. I like The Godfather enough. I don't go back and watch it, though. I don't need to. You know, there's just movies that you respect, but you don't necessarily love. So I could fully see that happening for some people with this flick. I could see you thinking, that was a good film, but I don't need to see it again. I could fully appreciate that, and I wouldn't even necessarily knock you for it. This isn't the kind of film that I put on every weekend, or something like that. But, yeah, I loved this movie. I loved everything about it. And in summary, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I mean, yeah, I love this flick, and I can't really say it enough. But yeah, tell me your thoughts down below. Maybe even if you didn't like the movie, tell me why down below. The only thing I could think of that some people might not like is maybe the ending, as I said. Beyond that, I think the rest is kind of unarguably kind of perfect. So yeah, big respect to all the people involved. Fantastic acting, great writing, great directing. Beautiful cinematography. I love the lack of music for the majority of the film. I almost wish they'd gone the whole way and had no music at all. I think that would have been cool, but I get it. I get why they did it. And I mean, the tension built up in the movie as well, especially with that first kill with the screwdriver in the basement. The build-up to that is so tense, and the acting is so good. I mean, these guys do more with just line-of-sight eye contact than the remake of Old Boy or the remake of Martyrs ever could even dream of doing, with reams of dialogue and all the gore and blood they can possibly muster. I mean, this is a great flick. As far as I'm concerned, I adore this film. Yeah, it's fantastic. So tell me your thoughts down below, as I said, and of course, stick around on the channel for more. And if by some chance you have not watched the movies that I mentioned, in particular, The Rover and 7 Days of Retaliation, please watch those two movies. If you haven't seen those and you have watched this one, you will enjoy those movies. If you enjoyed this one, I guarantee it. The Rover in particular, I absolutely love. It tends to get overshadowed by Good Time in terms of the Robert Pattinson performances, because Robert Pattinson is not the lead in The Rover. Check out that movie. It's very good. And 7 Days of Retaliation might upset some people, not in terms of content, but in terms of the story. But again, definitely check that one out. And I think if you watch them both, you might see what I mean about this movie feeling like those two put together. Kind of a movie about revenge in a gritty, realistic way, combined with a movie about a loner who doesn't say that much, doesn't emote that much, but is somehow very compelling. Those two aspects come together into this movie to me. But overall, tell me your thoughts. As I said, this really is the end of the video now. And of course, I'll see you next time with another review. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.